Hi, everybody, and welcome to the February 25th, 2025 Haldane Board of Education Workshop Meeting. I'm calling the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, President Clemens.
Here.
Vice President Valentine.
Here.
Trustee Cupper.
Here.
Trustee McNall.
Here.
Trustee Clemenson.
Here.
Okay, I don't believe we have any changes for the agenda, so can we have the recommended action to approve the agenda, please?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the interim superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agenda as written.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so our next open meeting will be the Haldane Board of Education. We'll conduct a business meeting on Tuesday, March 4th. So next week, right? Because we skipped the week of the February break here in the middle school, high school library. Even though it's a business meeting, we're going to have a special presentation to get an update on our universal pre-K. So that's very exciting. And then just also know that the board is in the process of holding a series of executive sessions leading to the appointment of our new superintendent. And then the other thing is that there are candidate petitions available for anyone interested in running for the 2 open Board of Education trustee positions that will be on the ballot at our annual district meeting on May 20th. So as a reminder, on that May 20th, it'll be the annual district meeting both to vote on the school budget as well as to elect 2 trustees for each for 3-year terms. And that's really all I have.
I only have a few brief updates this evening. We were off, of course, last week. But yesterday, stakeholder groups for the capital project met with CS Arch. We have our nurses office group, our support suite group, the student center group, and the STEAM group. We also have a safety and security, but they met prior to the break. So we did one meeting after the other. They were very productive. We saw some updated schematic designs. It's nice to see it start to take shape. We probably have about another month before designs will be presented to the board in a formal way. But I want to thank the administrative team because the entire team is involved. But additionally, we have about 24 staff members. We have teachers and specialists all contributing to this. And on Friday, we are sending, I believe, 9 people, Megan, is it? 9 people, Megan has scheduled them to visit the Marlborough School District where CS Arch just completed a major project. Okay. And many of the things that we want to accomplish have already been constructed. So it'll be an opportunity to speak with those administrators, the teachers, and the people working in the spaces, ask them, you know, are they happy with the final results? Are there things maybe that they would have done differently if they had a do-over? And I think that'll be a valuable conversation. And then we will continue to do, these stakeholder group meetings and refine our plans. And, hopefully within a month or so, we'll have CS Arch come and make a formal presentation to the board. So that is exciting. Also, since our last meeting, it seems like it's been a bit, but Sean and I met with through Westchester Putnam School Boards Association. I did put it in the board update, but we met with Assemblywoman Dana Levenberg. It was facilitated with districts, board members, superintendents from Putnam, Northern Westchester districts. It was a pretty good turnout. Sean and I, Dana was really interested in hearing, what are the concerns, what are the issues that school districts have. Sean and I talked about funding for electric buses, for special education services and programs, for pre-kindergarten, where, we are launching a pre-K program, but it's not fully covered by state funds. Some other districts raised, concerns over funding for school resource officers, which is an expense. The future of DEI initiatives was another concern that was raised, and ICE, immigration and enforcement in schools was another overarching concern from several districts. Assemblywoman Levenberg was very receptive, I thought. The timing is important because they're in the midst of budget discussions. They're doing joint Assembly, Senate budget hearings right now, which should conclude by Friday. And then we'll see some more progress with that. And on Friday, we are meeting with Rob Ralston. And I forget, do we have a board member able to join?
Again.
Sean, all right. Team up again. So, he is our representative in the Senate. I expect it'll be a similar type of meeting, but again, the timing is good. And what we're hearing from our superintendent representatives in Albany is that we don't expect any major changes to the governor's proposal for education, at least. I think there's some other issues they need to sort through, but Catherine and I have spoken, and we're watching carefully, but we think what the governor has proposed will remain and be supported by the Assembly and the Senate. Lastly, BOCES is hosting regionalization meetings, and Maggie, Peggy, and I spoke about this. On April 7th and May 5th, there are 2 evening sessions, and I know the Haldane board has been working overtime between superintendent, interviews and of course now the budget process. But this is the opportunity for all the districts that are participating in regionalization to come together and listen to, potential opportunities for partnering with other districts. We don't need an answer now. I'll add it to your Friday update. And I don't see an issue with, we're not discussing board business. So typically you don't want a quorum, but if more than 2 wanted to attend, I don't see an issue. I certainly will be there to represent the district, but I welcome any board members who want to join.
I've RSVP'd as well.
Well, good, okay.
Did everybody get the email? An email came. I had assumed that everybody got that email. Did everybody get the email? Okay, all right. Yeah, just because I think that's right. It should be anybody who is able to and wants to go.
That's all.
All right, so now we're going to move into a special presentation, sort of an early presentation of the 25-26 budget.
So Catherine and I have been working on the budget along with the entire admin team, and I thank everyone for their input. Let's just do a quick review. You've seen this before, our budget goals. We definitely want to make sure we're within the allowable tax levy increase. We want to stay aligned, everything we do with the missions and the goals of the district. We're looking for operational efficiencies wherever we can find them. Develop a plan for long-term capital improvements. We're doing a lot with a $28 million capital project. But as we know, this current building that we're meeting in is an aging building, and it has additional needs that won't be addressed through the capital project. So we do want to make sure the budget is in a strategic way set up to handle some of those facility issues that will present themselves in the near future. Funding opportunities to support the transition to zero emission buses. We're actively pursuing grant money. We'll have more information in about 6 weeks. And lastly, a transparent budget process, which happens every year. Megan plays a key role in communicating that and making sure that this is part of that process, just having open meetings that the public can participate in. The priorities, again, I'll move really quickly because you've seen this before, but we definitely have some curriculum initiatives. One in particular is early literacy, science of reading alignment, implementing multi-tiered system of support, a software. We of course are doing this intervention, but we want to have a software that can support it and make it more efficient. Pre-kindergarten, we've spoken about that. You'll hear more next meeting. We do have 13 families registered their children, so that's exciting. The cap will be 18. Also, new high school course, budget will support that. Stefan is working on that with our teachers.
Mental health and guidance will continue to be supported. Special education, we do want to increase funding for an anticipated extra placement. Softball field dugout, excuse me. We think it's long overdue, and I know there's some fundraising happening, but we want to partner the district along with that fundraising money and make sure that happens for next year. Air conditioning. This is a state requirement now that at 82 degrees, you need to start making accommodations for students and staff. At 88 degrees, 88, you have to vacate the room. So we do have some air conditioning. We do have plans with the capital project to have full central air up at the high school, but that's several years away. So we want to add some money to get some portable units, some window units, do some upgrades. So at least we have options. It won't be air conditioning in every single room, but it'll be enough where the principals believe they can work out some contingency plans on those very hot days. Also, our theater program has a lot of needs. They put on fantastic productions, but I gotta say, behind the scenes, there are challenges. I saw them firsthand, Damien, thank you, pointing out we had some leaks in the past, some damage was done. There's a lot of extra work that goes into kind of, just rigging the system that no longer operates to have these spectacular productions. But I think an investment needs to be made in just finishing the stage, some patching and painting, some basic stuff, but they need storage. The lighting system, needs upgrades, so we do want to allocate money for that. Also, transportation system analysis. This is a big one. I think as you're transitioning to EV, this will take about a year or two, but the board, I know, is very interested in doing this, and we do have a BOCES. Part of Northern Westchester has recommended a BOCES upstate that handles these and will give us some guidance. Lastly, improve the transportation fleet. We do have a need for one large school bus, and that would be a separate referendum. Now, what is new is we started adding some prices here, and these, I want to emphasize, these are estimates, but for curriculum, we'll get a better view here, about 50,000. For that software platform, we have 10,000. Pre-K, that number of 100,000, I do want to explain that. If we receive 18 students, which we're hopeful that we have, we will receive $5,400 from the state per student. That's about 97,000. But for this program, you do have a teacher and an aide, and of course there's salary and benefits, and plus curriculum materials and some other things that we need to purchase. So maybe a little bit of an overestimate, but the district's contribution will be about 100,000. However, we are using it, we're not adding staff, I want to emphasize that. We do have a lower enrollment in one of the grade levels in our elementary school. I'll go through enrollment shortly. So with that, we're able to relieve a teacher and reassign the person to pre-K. Special education funding, that placement, we anticipated 200,000. Of course, there is state aid that we receive in the following year for those placements. Field trip, that is something new. We realize we haven't increased the field trip district budget in many, many years. The foundation is very good to us, but we think the district ought to at least increase it and partner with foundation on future field trips. There's the dugout cost. We anticipate 20,000 district funds, plus then of course community is doing some fundraising. We'd like to allocate 30,000 to enhance air conditioning, 30,000 for the stage, and I think the theater program may have some money saved and they may be willing to partner with us, and so maybe we could do about 40,000 of work is the hope. And then that transportation analysis where we have 50,000 as a placeholder there. This is just a reminder, we are not recommending staffing increases, but in recent years, Haldane has done a really good job of increasing staff. And I applaud, particularly with the psychologist and the counselor supporting students' mental health. I think, all of those, were great investments. Now enrollment. So on the left side, you will see current enrollments. And I did an update just this morning because we did have a few students that registered and a couple of new families. And then on the right hand, you see by grade level, what we project as far as enrollment and how many sections. So it's pretty self-explanatory, but we're hoping for 18, as I said earlier, with pre-K. Kindergarten enrollment right now is a little lower than previous years. We're projecting 30, 2 sections of 15 would be a very desirable class size, and you can go right down the line.
Carl, quick question.
Yeah, questions?
Children in the community within the school district that are kindergarten aged, that do we know that total number? That census number?
I think we have a good idea, Ezra, but I don't think we have an exact number. Christine,
It's pretty good about knowing where all the kids
She does a
are,
lot
right?
of outreach. Yeah, she's even drilling down. So some parents, may choose if a child has a late birthday, sometimes they choose to give them an additional year of preschool. Yep. And she even has those numbers accounted for. She does a pretty good analysis. So I think that 30 is fairly accurate.
Fairly accurate of coming here, but then, yeah, so the question is designed, basically, quote unquote, how many kids are we not capturing that are here?
So, can I?
Sure.
So I think the demographic study that we did a few years ago had some projections about that. I know there have been, I know there had been some concerns because the number of children that have enrolled in the past couple of years was a little bit below that, but under those circumstances, it wasn't like we thought we were missing children. So anyway, I don't.
Well, but then they come back in. So
Yeah.
you lose them in if you lose them in kindergarten, they wind up coming back in first and second grade.
Right, yeah.
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 It's just good to know what that number is. I bet you Christine probably.
Yeah,
She's probably has.
and she'll be with us, next meeting, so sure. And again, forgive me, I'm just not that familiar with the district, but she did communicate with each and every preschool program. And again, it appeared to me that she did a pretty thorough analysis. So any questions about our elementary sections?
This is not on enrollment, but while we're talking about pre-K, I think you said if we get 18 students for pre-K, we'll get 5,400 per student from the state. Is that number different if we don't get up to 18?
Yes, if you have 16 students, for example, you get 5,400 times 16.
Okay, but it would still be 5,400 per pupil.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the 5,400 is per
That was my question.
pupil.
Yeah.
And there's enough, we can open up 2 sections of preschool. I think we have up to 40 students.
43, I think.
The problem is the 5,400 is not sufficient.
Right.
If that number were, let's say, 10,000, I think more districts would consider, even opening up 2 sections. So we're offering the one, and again, you have that opportunity where we don't have to hire a teacher. We're just reassigning a teacher to pre-K.
And will we have an aide regardless of how many students are in that class?
Yes, you are
We
required
really
to
have to
an
for
aide.
K, right?
That's a requirement for the. And in fact, there's even another option to go up to 21 students, but then you need 2 aides. So now there's an additional expense. And I have to say, I think 21, my personal opinion is that's high for pre-K. I think 18 is a good manageable number. Okay.
Thanks.
Great.
Middle school. So on the left, again, you see current sections and class sizes. Next year, we are looking to go to 3 sections on all 3 grade levels. And you can see the average class sizes, range from 20, maybe a few of 21. And in 8th grade, it's a little smaller grade level, 16 and 17. Questions? All right. Okay.
No, it's consistent with the stipulated goals from last year, right?
Yeah. And there was an investment made, I'm sure you recall, in aligning the middle and high school schedule. So this year, for example, there's more of a sharing of staff and it's more efficient. And that will, of course, continue next year. And the high school is different. It's not just, clean sections, of course. There are electives, there are advanced courses and such a range of courses. But you can see just in general, you get an idea of grade levels. And Julia is here if you have a more detailed question. But, roughly, ninth grade, I assume will be in around 4 sections in all your core classes. But then, of course, students have choices in high school. Any questions on the high school numbers? And you see the totals are a little lower, but pretty similar, year over year.
Julia, can you just remind me on the kids that are coming in from the high school, like are we in the process of like blending a good amount of age groups within classes too? So like
Mostly
classes are,
the science and the maths become more blended.
yeah,
Not as much in the freshman year, a little bit in the freshman year in science and math as if they were accelerated in 8th grade.
right.
But then as they become juniors and seniors, there's every class, I would say, besides English and social studies, are blended.
Pretty blended, yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm gonna turn it over to Catherine.
All right.
I'll give you the clicker.
Oh, thank you.
She'll go over the financials.
Okay, so we did take a look at this slide last time, but we did update it for 2 possibilities for our property tax cap this year. When I run the calculation, our allowable tax levy is 3.38%. So that is what we would be allowed to go to if we went to our maximum allowable. That would reflect for us a budget to budget increase of 700, we'll say 770,000 just for ease. I'm also working on developing a spending plan that would bring our tax levy increase from 3.38 down to 2.8. That's the levy that we had last year. I think it's probably a manageable number if you choose to do that, but it does equate a budget to budget increase of only 637,600, which is 132,000 less than what our maximum is. So there is, some concern of where we make up that $132,000. And again, just given the current inflationary environment, I do think it is important for us to just consider the potential long-term implications of not going to the maximum tax levy. That it obviously is a board decision. It's just, prices aren't going down, mandatory things that we have to pay for keep increasing. And, there is a concern of, would it catch up to us someday if we didn't go to our maximum tax levy?
Just for historical purposes, we've gone to the allowable tax levy, which is effectively a cap anyway. It's an imposed cap through law. We've gone to the allowable tax levy every year.
I believe every year since the cap was in. Julia, can you think of a year we didn't?
I think it's been at least close,
Right,
if not.
yeah.
At the cap.
What's the anomaly? There's an anomaly during COVID. We agreed to a rebate.
Yep.
We did a rebate during COVID.
Yeah, we took, I believe,
That's right.
$50,000 off of the tax warrant when we set the
Right.
tax warrant in August.
Right.
Gosh, good memory.
Glad you shown.
Of course.
We did put together just a chart to kind of show you where, if we brought the chart back further, we started at 2021, but the tax levy cap went in and, back then inflation was pretty, at a pretty low rate. And so we were pretty comfortable keeping our allowable at the maximum. But as you'll see, we've had a couple spikes where inflation has far outweighed the allowable, especially, 2023. But we also had some good numbers in those years with foundation aid as they were doing the catch up on our foundation aid and fully funding our foundation aid. So we were able to handle the difference that we saw there. You'll see that our allowable this year is 3.38. Inflation right now is running at about 3. So it would kind of equate to where we probably need to be.
But again, we are working on two budgets, one that would go to 3.38 and one that would keep us at 2.8. I would caution against trying to go any lower than 2.8, as much as I would love to be able to do that. I just think the gap would be a little too hard to close at this point, with some of the needs that we have that we talked about in our prior slides, which if we think about them, a lot of them tend to be one-offs. Like, once we do the air conditioners, we have air conditioners for a while. Once we do the transportation study, we've done the transportation study. So that will help us in future years. Again, just where our revenue comes from, foundation aid, it's one of our largest drivers. But as you know, the governor proposal for foundation aid went through a study with the Rockefeller Institute. They've made some recommended changes for how they're going to calculate foundation aid going forward. It's not officially completely done, but under the governor's proposal, we are projected to receive the minimum increase that you can receive, which is 2%, which for us is amounting to just under $58,000 increase for us for the 25-26 school year in foundation aid.
That's the minimum number that they're willing to give, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there were plenty of schools that received far more of a foundation aid increase than us. So when the governor said we're pumping up foundation aid, we really didn't see that.
No, because of the calculation also they changed the way that you calculate the wealth of a district and low income from just being free and reduced students to a different calculation that they use, and multiple different reasons that they changed it. But so we are, and we're considered a somewhat wealthy district, and so we were put into the minimum increase allowable. For our expense-based aid, again, this is aid that's given to the school districts based on their actual expenditures from prior years. It is also a complex calculation that takes into account wealth of the district, enrollment in the district, along with other formulas that are actually hard to dive into. But for next year, we are projected to have a decrease in our building aid, our transportation aid, our BOCES aid, and our private excess cost aid. Some of that is because we spent a little bit less money. Some of it is because enrollment went down. Some of it is because our district looks wealthy. So we do have right now a projected decrease of expense-based aid of $161,000, partially offset by the increase of foundation aid. This is just a slide, really it's more for you, Ezra. We talked about our transportation expenses. So we put this in here for you, just kind of our trend line of our transportation expenses as it has grown over the years. You will remember 2020, 21, 21, 22, there is some COVID impact on expenses there, as well as a bus driver shortage that we were suffering through during those years. This does include everything for transportation, including salaries, but it does not include our benefit for our employees. And as a percentage of our budget, it's just under 4% of our budget is for transportation expenses.
So that's not bad, actually. We keep our transportation under 4%. Seems pretty good. The issue that I see is we're getting less money from the state on transportation aid and going up by 40 G's.
Yeah, correct.
Right.
And then moving on, we have some decisions to make. So there are in the next few slides some TBDs or some unknown numbers. Our revenue summary, we have for 25-26, it looks like in state aid we'll have just $4.3 million. In our other revenues, we will be at $1.4 million. Our primary drivers of other revenue is tuition, interest income, interest on late property taxes, things like that. There's not much that we can do as a school district to increase our revenue. But that is, we are projecting a small increase in tuition because we do have more Garrison students coming than leaving, so that will help. And again, I've talked to you numerous times that I have very we've been very conservative with our budgeting for interest income. And I am putting an increase into that for next year because I do feel that although there's a chance interest rates will drop, I don't think they'll drop enough that we won't make our goal on interest income for next year. And then we'll just keep looking at it as the years go forward. We always put in our appropriated fund balance. It helps to balance the budget. Most school districts put in exactly the same amount, about $645,000. And that's just funds that we can dip into our fund balance if we really ran into some kind of budget need during the year. I have budgeted for possibly needing to use $250,000 of our reserves. I would primarily use it out of our retirement reserves if our TRS or ERS bills made it that we felt concerned about our budget. We could dip into our retirement reserves to pay those expenses. And then the biggest question mark right now is the tax levy. Again, I'm developing two budgets, one that brings our tax levy to the allowable and one that brings it to 2.8%. So that is kind of, a discussion that we have to have with how you feel about that and where you want. I don't need a decision tonight. What I plan to have for you for next week, if need be, is both of them. Like, this is where I think we'll be if we're at 3.38, and this is where I think we'll be if we're at 2.8. And we'll, Carl and I will try to tighten up some of the numbers on our wish list to hope that we have about as clean numbers as we can possibly get for you for next week's presentation. But I do believe by the end of the meeting next week, we'll need to have made a decision as to what, just so that we can really start focusing on what we need to do for the next month. And then again, just to kind of go through what the May vote will look like, we'll obviously have our standard proposition for the school district budget. Again, I have just X's in there because we don't really have that number set, but just a reminder, we'll have Proposition 1, which will be our school district budget. We will have Proposition 2, which is our capital reserve fund. This is not the exact language that we'll be using, but it was to get a discussion point with the board. As you'll remember, we have a capital reserve fund that we set up in 2017. It was allowable for 10 years, and we could save up to $1 million in that. It was voted on by, it was passed by the voters back then, and we did fully fund it up to the $1 million. We have allocated that $1 million to be used as part of the 2024 capital referendum. So as soon as we use that, we'll be starting at zero again. I think $1 million is too low with the age of the building and with the needs that the district has, as well as the fact that we should start probably saving for after we do phase 1 of the capital proposition. We probably want to start thinking about what a phase 2 might look like. So the decisions that we need to think about is, what do we think is a good number to put in there? And how much longer we might want to extend it. Right now, our capital reserve fund will expire in 2028. So we will have to do this at some point. I believe that this is the year to look at it and at least up it for another 10 years. And we need to come up with a number. This number is what we would put excess fund balance at the end of the year. As you know, we can keep 4% in unallocated for emergency expenditures, but anything over that, if we have any excess, has to be put in some kind of restricted reserve. We were in a meeting earlier today with the administration, and I said it's kind of like if you balance your home budget and at the end of the year you have a little extra and you have to decide what to do with it. Some people put it in a savings account. That's what this would be doing. We'd be putting it into a savings account for future needs. I would probably recommend at this point a minimum of 3 million, probably more likely 5 million. We can set it for whatever. I just, over 10 years, I'm not sure how much we'd actually be able to save, but so I would probably think at this point, with some calculations that I'm doing, I would hope that over the next 10 years we could get it to about 5 million.
Great.
And then we will be having our Proposition 3. That's our normal vehicle purchase proposition. And this year we are needing 1 large school bus. And right now we have it at an estimate of $175,000. And as you all know, this is a tax neutral proposition because as debt rolls off from a vehicle that we have already purchased, we take on the same amount of debt to purchase another vehicle. So it's a tax neutral proposition. And then we were just gonna go over the budget timeline. Again, I'll present more next week. And then on March 14th or March 18th, we're ready for our pre-budget hearing. So we really, like I said, at the end of next week, we'll need to know at what tax levy limit you'd like us to develop the budget. And then on April 1st, we'll have it all put together with our estimated revenues. We should have the final numbers from the legislature by then. And then hopefully we'll have to adopt it on April 22nd, public hearing on May 6th, and our vote on May 20th. So that is just where we stand with budget development at this point. Questions?
Gratitude.
Yeah, I love that.
Presenting. Unplanned, but.
I think it was good. I think I even said it this morning, like this meeting, we had thought about postponing, and I think this exercise was really good to start really seeing. I've been diving into the stage I'm at, just so you know, is I have gone through the rollover budget. So what I do is I take our current year budget, actually just roll everything forward and make any adjustments to it that are mandatory, contractual rate, wage increases, our health insurance premium increases, our overall insurance. So I take everything that I know of right now and I add that in because I don't have a choice for those. Those aren't our wish list. Those are things that we will be paying next year. I could make any budget corrections. Like if there's something that's been consistently under budget for years, I try to fix that. If there's something that's been consistently over budget for years, I try to, so I try to smooth it all out. And then that kind of leaves me with what money am I still allowed to, I'll use the word play with, but you know what I mean? It's like our money that we can put into different things. And so right now, like I said, I'm at the stage where I have our revenue except for the tax levy limit. So right now, I have to be honest, we have to do some more massaging of the numbers because either of our tax levy limits right now do show me having a small deficit that we need to cover. But I'm not at the point where, I'm raising any kind of alarm flags. Like there's still some massaging of the numbers that I need to do before.
Just for perspective, you mentioned the health insurance premium percentage increase, of which we do not control because we're part of a consortium. Roughly, what was that increase?
4.9.
4.9%. It's significant.
And Ezra, I'll add to that, it's gone up somewhere between 5% and 8% every year for the past half dozen years. It's outpaced your ability to raise revenue under a tax cap.
Oh, yeah. And it goes up more than wage as a percentage.
Without question. And we are happy, Catherine and I, like the transportation, you asked for a bit more information on that. We're happy if you want to examine and drill down on a particular area of expenditure like health. It's easy for us to give you some additional information if it's helpful to the board, because again, what we're looking for guidance, from the board on is 2.8 versus the 3.39, right? Is the maximum. So we are looking for the board, and we're happy to discuss it a little bit now, or if you want to kind of process this and ask us for more information and pick it up at the next week.
Well, I think the key is that between the two, what are we gonna miss? These implemented things other than, budgeting or taxing people for things that we don't really know yet about in the future. What would the big differences between the two budgets be, right? And we talked briefly about it in our agenda review meeting, a couple weeks ago. It sounds like there's a little bit of wiggle room with some of the things. I appreciate you doing that, going through and having two scenarios that we can look at and think about and ask questions about.
I think it's going to be a healthy discussion for next week of being able to actually decide, when we start the budget slideshow about what our priorities are, to make sure that we're aligning a budget that is meeting those priorities, without overtaxing the taxpayers.
Go ahead.
I have two questions.
Okay, that's fine.
Since I have two, you only have one. So
It's huge. No,
what
you
if
go
yours is
first.
one of mine? No, Michelle.
Okay, so my question has to do with the other attachment online. That was the executive summary in the 5-year plan, and that's from 2023. So I'm
The
just
building conditions.
The building condition, yeah. So how is that sort of playing off of what we're doing with the budget here? Like, are we ticking away at those things? You know, are we in year one? Have we addressed all of the things?
That's related to this.
Right, and so all of that, and so, you know, the total for year one was like somewhere in like 7 million, and I know some of those things we're addressing in the 2024 capital project, you know, some of the AC and things like that, so I'm wondering, you know, are we kind of choosing what we want to address this year, and how does that, do we have the money in the capital reserve fund, how are we making those decisions?
Great question. So, and important, and I thank you for reading it. We apologize. I thought of it this morning.
Okay,
I thought it would be helpful in
Totally.
discussing this topic.
Yeah.
but yeah, I've got
So-
my new trustee hat on, so I'm kind of like, wait, what is this document, and where are we at within this document?
We're required every 3 years to do building conditions. And it basically identifies high priority facilities needs, middle level priority, and then lower priority. It is somewhere in the vicinity, I believe, of $9 million of, you know, things that probably should be done in the near future. Yes, you are correct. Some of them will be addressed through the capital project, but certainly not all of them. I think the idea is we wanted to just give, in trying to determine how much maximum you would want to be in this fund. And again, it's, as Catherine said earlier, it's going to take years to build it up. And we have to be very careful. We have to communicate very clearly with the public. This came up at the admin meeting. We don't want people, if we set a $3 million maximum, it may take us 5 or 6 years to reach that 3 million. And then we would need to ask the public to approve spending it on various facilities projects. We don't want the public to think mistakenly that we're asking them to approve another 3 million, because that's not the case here. So we just need guidance from the board on setting a maximum amount. And then as years go by, if we have good financial years and there is some surplus, the board then can move that surplus into this fund and build it up over time.
And one of my questions is related to that. So talk to me a little bit about the different philosophies on why you might want to have a number that is closer to 10 versus one that's closer to 1. Why might a district want to keep it artificially low?
I think if you simply didn't have facility needs,
Yeah.
then you may say, why park so much money in a reserve
Right.
where we don't anticipate spending it?
Right.
But I guarantee you that's not Haldane's problem.
Yeah.
With this older building.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the high school is going to be in good shape when this capital project's done. But this and the campus, you know, there's a lot of masonry work, road work. You know, these are old buildings, and you know, roofing projects come up. So yeah, I think leaning towards having more in there. And again, you know, it's the board would set up a maximum. It would be built up over time, but then you need to ask the public, if you say, if you want to spend 2 million on a roofing project in the future, you would need to get voter approval for that. And you'd probably add it to a budget.
The only time you can bypass that is if something like really emergency happened. You can do an emergency use of your capital reserve, but it is with that, you have to try to replenish it. I don't think you have to try, I think you have to replenish it the following year, if you don't have voter approval for it. And the other thing to remember is we have allocated every dollar that's in our capital reserve. So for right now, if we ran into one of those emergency situations, we don't even have anything because we have already allocated the $1 million to the 2024 capital referendum. So at a very minimum, we would keep it at just to get it back to $1 million. I just think with what we're going through and what we see and what you read in the building conditions survey, it's probably not enough.
Yeah.
And just
Sure.
just to that point, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but also, Sean, you know, this is it's a reserve fund that can only be spent on certain things. You know, there are districts who don't quite have the fiduciary responsibility that Haldane does, and has far more than 4% in an unrestricted reserve fund. You know, you can run their ST3s, you know, there's, you know, we keep it at what is supposed to be the maximum, but there are districts that go well beyond that. And then, you know, it gives them more flexibility, but it's also not, you know, kind of like
fiduciarily responsible at some level because it's, that's the taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
Right? So by having the capital reserve fund, you're basically saying like, we have these numbers. If you don't have, maybe if you carry more than that 4%, which you're really not supposed to do, then you might not need such a capital reserve fund of which you then tell people, hey, this is coming in and then this is coming out.
Yeah.
Another example could be if some districts get back 80 or 90% building aid, right? So they may say, okay, instead of allocating money here, let's use it for other purposes. We have other needs and we will borrow because we know if we do a major project, we think that's we get 90% of the cost. So this may not be as important to them.
That makes sense to me, because I recall when we first discussed this, Catherine, that the community, there was some conversation then about raising it above $1 million. And for some reason, we decided that $1 million was the cap because going above that, there was some pushback about what that meant. And I was curious as what might the argument have been at the time?
I think it would be if we thought we could get it to 3 or 5 million in like a year or two, it would be that we actually have way too much money. And
Right. So
that would be pushback. Because that would imply that we have overtaxed our taxpayers, that we ended up with a surplus.
Gotcha.
But given the facilities report, which is asking for, or, looking for at least, $7 million even in the first year of kind of like urgent needs, why would the thought be that $3 or $5 million in the reserve fund is too much?
I don't think it would be.
Yeah, okay.
But I think the key is in communicating, as I said earlier, this is a little complicated. So we just have to be really clear. And that's why, again, knowing those building condition survey needs that have been identified, I do think we need to communicate that very clearly if we're asking them to go to the building.
My other question was about the bus. I know that there will be members in the community who will ask about why are we getting another bus like this? I'm curious to know that based on the current mandate, we'll buy this bus in 25. Will we have to retire that bus? And is it 32 that we're supposed to have, or is it 37?
It's
35.
So we're going to be right in that
35.
10-year. We're going to be right in that 10-year margin. That's typically when. Right. That's what I want to make sure.
They're 35, but for the first time, our representatives in New York State said, the governor said 2035 is an aspirational date.
Yeah.
The governor never said that before, but I think in the current national level where potentially money may be clawed back, again, we're waiting on the CPA grant. We don't know. If there's less federal dollars to support the transition, can the state handle it? And there's a lot of concern that they won't be able to, fully fund school districts transitioning. So they may need to back off and the general thinking is that date will need to be
Adjusted.
And the cost of electric school buses is going up, not down, so making it harder and harder for us to even.
Well, there's a supply and demand issue. So electric cars are actually dropping a bit, but electric buses are going up dramatically. It's slow in production and there's so much grant money that, as long as people have the grant money, they will spend whatever the dealers are asking for pretty much. So it's an interesting situation.
Yeah. Maybe a question for another time will be, what do you do when you find yourself in a hybrid situation where you need to have the facilities to both manage a typical bus as well as electric buses?
No, good question. In fact, with the architects, we did the site planning right before the break, and we talked about that. Where would the charging stations go? How would we run the electric? You probably will be in a hybrid situation at some.
I just have one comment about the capital reserve fund. So, and thinking about, and all of this honestly is always thinking about how do you communicate it to the public in a way that's understandable and also palatable and doesn't engender concern. So the difference between like 3 million and 5 million, given the level, and I don't need an answer of this, but given the level of need expressed in the building condition survey, would we really need to set the capital reserve fund up to $5 million, knowing that it would take us a while to save that much, and we probably need to be spending some in the meantime? And so this is really more about like perception and messaging kind of question, like, 1 million to 3 million versus 1 million to 5 million, and what does that mean? That like we understand, because we think about this like what it would mean to, and that it represents responsible budgeting and spending to be able to fund those reserves over time. Like we understand this, but we think about this a lot.
Correct.
And so again, my question comes back to, given the level of anticipated need to spend money in the capital reserve fund as we save it, is there something to be gained by setting it at $5 million instead of $3 million? Because my naive thinking is like, well, $3 million, given that, in a couple of years, we're probably going to need to ask the public if we can spend it on something, maybe setting it at $3 million is going to be enough. And that's actually an increase that we will be more successful in explaining. So that's just my thoughts about that.
I think with setting it with a brand new 10-year term, we could consistently fund and spend and fund and spend up to, that
Yeah.
we could.
I need to actually, I'll look again, because I don't, anyway, that was just one thought about that as we're moving toward this. And I guess the other thing I would say, and I think it's okay for me to say this. I mean, in our agenda meetings with Carl, and then also with, Catherine Mooney, Maggie and I really drove, I think, the request for the two different options. Given the community's enthusiastic support for, supporting the capital, the capital project bond referendum, it seemed judicious for us to at least explore the possibility of not going up to the tax levy limit. There are, I'm sure, are the allowed tax levy, the allowable. And Ezra raised one good point about like how some of these costs are going up at rates that far exceed what our tax caps are, that inflation and remains certainly remains a concern. But I just did want to say that this is something we felt like we really, to just jump to the allowable tax levy in this year in particular was something that we wanted. We didn't want to just do that without considering alternatives. I guess the only other thing, and maybe this is an offline conversation, but like, I understand the concern, right, is that if we don't go up to the allowable tax levy limit, it could be in years to come that we're going to be in uncomfortable situations, right? We see that happen in other districts. But we also know, and correct me if my thinking's wrong or we need to talk about it some other way, but we also know that there are a lot of staff that have been here for a long time that are approaching retirement age. We don't know if they're going to retire, but we know that's going to happen. And when that happens, that's a reduction in staff costs, which are the main driver of our budget. We also know that there is there appears to be some reduction in the number of students, right? And so it suggests the possibility that as some teachers retire, there may not always be a need to replace those people. I mean, and those are the kinds of things that I guess I'm going to want to try between now and next week, I guess, maybe with a conversation with Catherine, but like, there seemed to me that there might be some other things driving. Costs are always gonna go up, right? But there may be some factors driving the possibility that costs aren't going to go up as much. And of course, what the board decides to do in terms of 2.8 or 3.4 essentially is a collaborative decision, but those are the kinds of questions I have right now. So.
Well, I mean, I would assume along with the side-by-side, some suggestions about programmatic cuts will be made. So we'll have some sort of narrative to attach to what does it look like for our district to have $132,000 less.
Right, because
That's
like
gonna
I
be-
said, with still working on the numbers, both
Right.
scenarios at where the point I am in budget development right now does show a deficit.
Right.
Obviously, a smaller deficit at the 3.38. It's not an unmanageable deficit, I don't think, at either one. It's just figuring out where are we gonna, where will we cover that from? Whether it's we push off one of those wish list items for one more year, or, you know, we have lots of different options
Right.
that, you know, we'll be able to talk about more in depth next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're now at the time in our meeting for communication from the public on special presentations and agenda items. The Haldane Board of Education desires and values input from the entire school community. The first public comment session is reserved for comments on special presentations and active agenda items. And I think we're going to say. All right, so moving into consent agenda minutes. May I have a motion, please?
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda financial, may I have a motion, please?
So moved?
Second.
I just wanted to say I looked really closely at the sports merger agreement.
Me too.
It's kind of amazing. Like, what?
Very early for baseball
Yeah.
of the year, when we don't even know for this year.
Oh, that's what you said?
Rising with hair, no,
Oh,
but it just seems early, sorry.
Oh, it
I didn't
did.
interrupt.
all right.
For the spring sport, I think.
Well, but we don't have to
Yeah.
go into them if we don't need them, but it's putting them in place. I was actually gonna have a different message than Maggie, which was, I thought it was really great that through the mergers, it offered lots and lots of different
Lots of
opportunities for our students,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
for students like to get to swim and, you know, play hockey. I mean, it really reflects our commitment to providing students with the opportunities that meet what they want. So, yeah. All right, so, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And the consent agenda personnel, may I have a motion, please?
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, unfinished business, short superintendent search update, moving forward, we're on target. I think, you know, just continued thanks to everybody, who's helping to make it happen.
Thank you to you
Yeah.
for creating this, I mean, for creating the process, facilitating it, really. I
With-
mean, it's not easy, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of hours, it's a lot of opinions
Yeah.
that you are going back through sometimes a second time and having us, you know, so I appreciate that.
I give you a public service award.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Which is a nothing.
Yeah.
That's how public service works.
It's not just.
Entirely forgive.
Be more nice and sweet.
It doesn't come with a prize. That's when it comes with Panera.
I will say that.
It's been very well run. You've done it.
Well,
We really do
thanks.
appreciate it.
Well,
And
it-
Lynn and Neil have done a very good job. Everybody involved has been,
Catherine and Megan.
yep, everybody involved has been great.
Yeah, it really is a collaborative effort. And so, it's a good system we have going on, and I appreciate the thanks. It has not been It has not been an insignificant undertaking, I will certainly say that. But an exciting one. And then for new business, we have our CSE, CPSE recommendations. We have the recommended action, please?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the interim superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendations of the committees on special education and preschool special education as presented.
Yeah, we have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're now at the time in our meeting for the second opportunity for communication from the public that would be related to any and all school district matters. All right, board reflections. Does anybody have any reflections before we? I'll say I've spent a lot of time with the board members and it's pretty great.
I did want to say, I did want to say that we adhere very, very fiercely to the rules that govern our gathering, that we do not gather except when the camera's on. Like, we don't do that. So this has, in my 6 years, this has been the most time I've ever spent with the board, and it's very gratifying. So I agree.
I think it's nice. Anything? Mr. Albano? Superintendent final thought? All right. I move to adjourn the meeting. May I have a second, please?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.